Please remember to download the Zingo TV app on the iOS stores and Android device stores. When you download, make sure to leave a comment, give your thoughts on that. Both apps are free. Zingo TV is available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire, Fire TV sticks, Roku sticks, and all smart TVs 2016 and forward. This show is also broadcast on 35 different platforms throughout the world. Unfortunately, we have not hit Antarctica yet, but that is still on the hit list. We're going to get there one day, and I'm going to change that. Anyway, hope you guys are doing well out there. My name is Scott Churchson, and this is Tales from the Film Set. Alongside Mr. Rob Statz and Ms. Jasmine Bloch-Krempels, we have over 30 plus years in the film industry to talk about all the good, the bad, and the sometimes really, really funny things that we've experienced in the 30 plus combined years that we've been in the film industry. Alongside us today is a man of great charisma, persona, and also, frankly, great hair as well. You probably know him best as the Chulies gum rep guy from the Clerks movies. Came in from the Clerks 1994, was eventually sprayed with a fire extinguisher, which we do want to talk about. I have a couple of questions on that one as well. But ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Scott Churchson, how are you, sir?
Good. How are you? Thanks for having me on tonight, Scott.
Hey,
and everybody
else. For being on. Thank you for being on.
Sure.
So, yeah, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about it. And you guys, Jasmine, Rob, if you got questions, please just fire in. I'm totally cool with that, of course, as always. But, yeah, you and Kevin go back literally almost 3 decades at this point.
It blows my mind. It's been that long, but filmed in 93, actually tail end in 92 into 93, and then released in 94. Amazing.
It's funny how tiny little film became the hope for so many, because that little film launched an entire career for a bunch of people there.
That's right.
Built lifetime friendships between you, Brian O'Halloran, Marilyn, Ernie, everybody like that. You guys have become almost a second family in a lot of ways too.
Well, what's really nice about it is it really grew the friendships much more after it was the tail end of the 90s into the 2000s. The convention world really started to bring us all together. And we got to spend a lot of fun, quality time together. When we shot, I was up in North Jersey like I have been my whole life. I'm 10, 15 minutes outside of the bridge or the tunnel. Those guys are down in the South, where they are, down in Leonardo South. They're about an hour and a half, give or take, from me. So, and I didn't know anybody personally at the time. I just saw a audition notice in the paper. And back then, it's going back now, before cell phones, before the internet, really. It was like you went to the trade papers for looking for acting auditions. And he had posted an ad in one of my local papers in the classified. And it was a lot more rare to find somebody filming a movie in New Jersey back then. Now you throw a rock and somebody's shooting a movie on their phone, but it wasn't that way then. So I said, wow, I have got to get to this audition. So I didn't really know anybody, actually Brian O'Halloran as well, Marilyn Gigliotti as well. Those two knew each other, but they didn't know Kevin. The obvious ones are Jay. Jay was a real friend of his. Not Lisa Spoonhour, but Randall, Jeff Anderson, he knew him from school. Ernie O'Donnell was a childhood friend. But a lot of us didn't know Kevin. It was just actors found an audition and, fortunate to get cast.
Yeah. So in this case here, yeah, I wondered about that because I knew, like I said, I knew Brian didn't know them, but a lot of them were already a family. I mean, you had Walt, you had Brian Johnson as well. So in this case here, you literally found it in like what, the Ridgewood News or Bergen Record or something like that?
It was either the Record or the Star Ledger.
Kind of wish I saw that, because that would have been 92. I would have been. I had the car. I had a license at that point.
Back then, it was just in the classifieds. You would see actors' auditions. We would get backstage, the trade paper, and that's what you would scour each week. And there were one or two others that were around, but the landscape was completely different back then. So to look at my classified, I have the clip on my Facebook somewhere. I still have the classified ad. Indie filmmaker explores the day in the life of a convenience store clerk. It was a blurb, some similar to that. And I thought, well, that just sounds cool, whatever. Filming in New Jersey, I'm there. So yeah, we drove down and I almost didn't get to the audition. That story's on the IMDb. I got there very early in the Atlantic Highlands. It's a shore area, shore town. I went off on a jetty. The beach was not open, and I was rehearsing. And I was gesturing wildly and doing my thing, not realizing from the beach out on the jetty, it looked like there was a lunatic out on the jetty. So security people had come because they thought either the person was inebriated or maybe they were going to hurt themselves. And then when they got to speak to me, they saw I was of my right mind. And I said, listen, please, if you're going to arrest me, do it after the audition, just up the block. And, they knew the theater. And so that was kind of a wacky story, which I never told those guys for many years because I didn't want to bring negative attention to myself,
Well, Kevin's usually prone to doing that anyway, usually with the self-deprecating talk of his own.
True.
So very awesome. So I was, like I said, I always wondered if you had like a monologue, if you went in there and started doing Hamlet or something like that, or if you actually maybe just.
The first auditions 2 nights at the Atlantic Highlands Theater. I think it's called Atlantic Highlands Theater. I mean, I'm probably blowing that now, and I shouldn't because we've had so many events there. And but it was 2 nights. I went the first night, and you did a prepared monologue. And if they reviewed the tapes, and if they dug you, they called back and said, "Come on down. Now you read from the script." So nobody read from the script for their audition. We all did prepared monologues. I did a piece from the movie Diner, Daniel Stern's character, Shrevey. And like most auditions, when I think I killed, the phone doesn't ring. And when I think the phone rings. And this was one of those where I thought I didn't really nail it. But the phone rang and he said, "Yeah, we want you to come back and read from the script now." And it was very exciting.
Nice. And again, you had no idea what it was going to turn into at that point. Because
not at all.
Fast forward 22 years later, and you're carrying my future wife's purse because she has a broken leg. Clearly the high point of when, the career when she met you the first time, way back in 2016 for Chris Cullen's Film Festival.
Yeah, that was, that's at the Jersey City. No, not Jersey City.
No, that was Brightside, I think.
Brightside, right.
Yeah, it was over in Jersey City.
Right,
but,
right.
Yeah.
What was funny about that too, and I only was given, well, not the thing with the purse, the thing with the script. I was only given the Chuli's Gum Guy pages. So for a year, I had no idea what went on before and after the Chuli's Gum Guy. I just got the Chuli, and that's not uncommon necessarily, especially for somebody who is like a day player or just a featured character actor. You've got 10 or 12 pages, you don't get the whole script. So you could imagine after waiting and not really being sure what it was they were doing, I just got to see a couple of different days. I mean, I had an idea of what it was going to be. But when I got that first VHS screener, it was all new to me too, except for the Julie scene. So I was just like blown away at how irreverent it was, really. He's got away with words, you might say.
Yes. You obviously in this case also helped coin the phrase cancer merchant. So thank you for that. Yeah.
Did you know it was in black and white originally, or like was that?
I think we did. Yeah, I think it was something that wasn't. They weren't covert about that fact, and it was done as a budget choice, and it worked in the favor of the film as far as the aesthetic. People thought it was an artistic choice, and that's great if they do. But Kevin has, he's debunked that right away. Shooting color not only is more expensive for film, but lighting color is a whole other nightmare. So he went with black and white, and it really works well because the movie has a real punk rock kind of feel anyway. So, I thought it did end up working aesthetically very well for the movie.
Especially because all the shoots were really, really night shoots too.
Right, and he would literally have the window blotted out with a giant garbage bag.
So, anybody else before I continue?
Oh, go ahead.
All right, cool. Just figured basically give you guys a shot. So in this case here, the one, Marilyn, bless that woman's heart, got the opportunity to spray you with a fire extinguisher. Was that something that they required massive safety takes on just to make sure they got it? Did they do a couple of rehearsals with it just to basically really make sure they got you 3, 4, 5, 8 times, or was it a one done?
Well, I'm going to have to, I guess what I'll do is well, it's not a spoiler alert, but whenever she talks about it, she makes a joke of it herself because she wishes she would have really got to shoot the gun. She didn't shoot the extinguisher. She got up on in fact, I don't know I was even there for this cutaway shot of her with the fire extinguisher, but that was simulated with baby powder.
Mm-hmm.
And they blew something else out at us, used, the magic of sound effects. It sounds like, but the reality of, for him he would have had to gotten some type of safe prop to use, which there was no budget for much of anything like that. So the fact that it's all film magic and different takes and not really a real fire extinguisher. And I would imagine, a lot of people think it was, and I don't think you really can, that's pretty unhealthy to get blasted with that.
We've seen weird stuff on film sets, so would never surprise me. But so yeah, I said, okay, so basically you spoiled it for me there, so it really didn't happen. But all right, we'll manage there. Were the cigarettes real though? But that wasn't CGI?
No, that was all. Yeah, there was no CGI cigarettes. That was pelting him with unlit cigarettes. And what's unfortunate is when the Trulies guy puts the bag on the counter and pulls out that lung,
mm-hmm.
They put a lot of effort and time into that prop. It was a big piece of haggis wrapped around a styrofoam ball, and they had dirt and they had cigarette butts snuffed out on it. And it was a big, wacky, hideous thing. But because they never were really able to get a tight shot, it's lost, unfortunately. You can't really say what that is. But that thing was, I literally had gloves to put it on because it was so gross. But unfortunately, you never got a tight shot of that insane. It was supposed to be a smoker's lung.
Well, still looks impressive just the same.
Yeah, it's still, I guess, another one of those things that, people don't realize what it may or may not be.
Mm-hmm. So basically right now, we've had Clerks 1, 2, the animated series, which nobody ever talks about, and I really think they should.
Oh, I love that.
ABC was not prepared for that.
Not at all. And
no. Yeah, I don't know who greenlit that one.
It came at a time where there wasn't that much real envelope pushing. There was, Family Guy and South Park blew everything through the roof with pushing the envelope. And then a lot of dedicated networks were starting to pop up, but you didn't have that much of that at that time. And they were on a major network. So they had real, they were really reined in what they could do, which, as far as subject matter and verbally. But one thing Kevin loved about it was the beauty of animation. It was his imagination. You could draw anything, which how crazy the episodes get.
Mm-hmm.
It's heartbreaking that it didn't go on because I just was so happy for Brian having them voice it was golden. The cartoon I think is hilarious.
Got Alec Baldwin in there too.
Yeah, we have a lot of cool folks that Judge Reinhardt.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, like I said, in this case also they had to change obviously marijuana and everything like that to fireworks, if I remember correctly, just to to sneak it into that ABC. I don't even know if they were owned by Disney at that point or not, but just to get past ABC in general. And then canceled after 2 episodes, and then 6, and that was the end of that. But
it seemed like it would have had a nice life on Comedy Central later at night. You know what I mean? Like what was it doing on ABC? That was bizarre.
Right. I don't know. I don't know the whole genesis of how it ended up at ABC, but it was a pretty solid deal. Kevin was excited. He knew he had to rein in his brand of humor. He was afraid if it might have to be reined in too much, that it would lose what it had in the film, but it gained a whole other type of even with the reining it in for ABC, it's still pretty nutty and bizarre what they did in those 6 episodes, and it was just so much fun. And you're right, if it would have been maybe a few years later and on a dedicated network where, you know, you're on cable now or you're pushing the envelope on all these different channels, but you know, that was a primetime NBC. Pretty sure it ran in primetime hour.
It did. It was like 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock at night, I think.
They had a Super Bowl commercial that year and everything.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, such as it was. But 2 episodes gone, but not forgotten.
But 6 on DVD, so you know. You
two episodes aired, but 6 in total. I meant.
Right.
And then of course they did the animated Lost episode, which took place at Julie Dwyer's funeral.
Right.
You know, and in the middle of Clerks and everything like that to add some, to add some story to it. But in this case, I did want to talk a little bit of Clerks 3, and I did talk to you about this first. I know you've got some ideas. Do not obviously say anything that might jeopardize anything. Brian O'Halloran has come out on a few occasions and said that the original script for Clerks 3, if you paid him $3 million, he will tell you what that script was, because that was Kevin's legal fee to sue Brian or sue anybody who spilled the details on that script. You know, I remember working with Brian back in 2013, and he said it was the best thing that Kevin had ever written. So for 7+ years now, I've wondered what that other Clerks 3 script was. So again, whatever you can say, whatever you can't say, protect yourself first. That is first and foremost.
Well, I'll tell you that the first version of Clerks 3, which did not get obviously filmed or even considered. Well, it was considered, but then the whole thing kind of fell apart at that point. It was darker, and it was primarily Randall's story, which was another reason why things didn't work out, because Jeff Anderson had a difficulty working it out with Kevin as it would come to pass. And they did read that script, or a slightly reworked version of that script, a year or two ago at the theater down in Atlantic Highlands and I wasn't able to go. I had a family member who had some issues, an elderly person who had just fallen that weekend or the weekend prior. And I was really needed here. I couldn't go, but I never got to hear it either because of that. But now, you know, I mean, it's whoever was there, and there might even be a version of it floating around online, but I know it was darker, and I know that it wasn't nowhere near the tone of what the reboot was, because some of the things from that first Clerks 3 was cherry picked in reboot. But now he has a completely new Clerks 3 thing happening that he's talked about pretty much in detail online. And it's pretty exciting. There's a really good chance you're going to see a lot of the old folks from the first movie get popped in there because of the nature of what's happening in this newest version of the script. So, in fact, he photobombed, you might say. We were doing the Wizard World panel 2 weekends ago, Brian, Marilyn, and I. And all of a sudden, bang, Kevin popped in and Jay popped in. And it was super cool. So he was talking to them, chatting it up and saying, hey, folks, the people you see on the screen here are going to all be part of Clerks 3, which is a wonderful thing to find out in such a surprising way, which nobody holds that as, because so many things change between his different versions of scripts. Then when you're actually filming, things change. I'm on board whether I actually am on screen or not, because I love they're all my friends, and I can't wait to see the shenanigans that everybody gets into, whether I'm part of it or not. And that's really the God's honest truth. But it was a wonderful thing to have happen live on the Wizard World panel, so to speak, you know.
Well, Kevin's always been a guy that kind of lives, puts his emotions out there. Some people, keep him inside, but he has been very honest, especially in light of the heart attack a few years ago, to really about who he is now, and just really just in general, just like I said, just being very open and honest about everything. So, the reboot was great because a lot of you guys came back. The guys from Comic Book Men, Ming, Mike, they were all, he figured out a way.
Yeah.
And that was a cool thing about that. You know, and that's, I mean, even when he did, Strikes Back, he managed to figure out, even at that point, how to bring a few folks back.
Strike Back is, I mean, I love the guy. I'm super partial to all the movies, all of them. There's something about all of them that I like. Red State, out of all of them, it might be the toughest one for me to. It's so disturbing that for me, and I like Justin Long so much. And I realize he's playing somewhat of a despicable guy, and he's supposed to get his comeuppance, but it's a tough one. It was very disturbing. My lady friend and I saw it in the theater, and there were a handful of Kevin supporters in that screening. And when the credits finished rolling, everybody was super quiet and kind of numb. Not necessarily a horrible thing, but it was such a 1-2 punch. So very, very disturbing. But Strike Back was where I was going with this. I love Strike Back as a film. It's a very entertaining film, Strike Back. And the cameos are just bang, 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 bang. It's like a who's who of who was pretty hot at that point and who went on to continue. Will Ferrell at that time was not the Will Ferrell that he became, in terms of his huge, massive film career. So many awesome cameos in that, and just a fun road movie, but the reboot and the way he brought us in for the reboot was so sweet and so unexpected. And when they told me what they were going to do, it was just so amazing to me that if I ever had a chance to cameo in any of his films, the idea that I'd be cameoing as myself, which is what that was in the reboot, was just so meta and weird. It was like pretty awesome.
But like I said, that's good. Because like I said, Kevin, that's who he is. I mean, I remember when we were down there when he got the key to the city in Red Bank.
Oh, that was a nice thing.
I mean, my first interaction with Kevin Smith, he literally gave me a donut. I got a jelly donut from the man, and I'm like, because I was there with Chris Cullen, and I mean, I didn't care what donut I want. Jelly donuts, honestly, is not my preference. But when Kevin Smith offers you a donut and says, "Hi, I'm Kevin. How are you?" You take it, But it was just, that's, like I said, that's Kevin personified. And I think it trickles down in a lot of ways to everybody else involved, that people can leave but still come back. And that's, like I said, I think it's huge. I mean, even now 27 years since Clerks been released, and that's dating all of us, I think, a little bit there. He still remembers everybody, still keeps everybody in mind, and tries to figure out a way to make it work. Because I think you guys are second family to him as well.
Well, that movie that first one, no matter what he's done since, and I mean, it could have changed the direction that his career may have taken had he had some really huge blockbuster films, maybe in a string of that direction, like really
Superman.
Right.
Superman.
No matter what comes out, usually at any time, 9 times out of 10 is from the director of Clerks comes X, Y, or the director of Clerks and Chasing Amy, because those are the two critically that got a lot of love and embrace. The critics really embraced those two. I think Chasing Amy is a wonderful movie, but that first film means so much to him and all of us, because as a character actor and a guy on the East Coast who was into music, I'm a musician first and foremost, but an actor, that's real close second to my musical passion for music. It opened up doors from right after Sundance on. More and more auditions and doors were opened because you're not anonymous now. So, which is nice for a character actor. They've seen you on screen, yelling and screaming, causing a ruckus, know that it worked. That scene sent Harvey Weinstein running out of the theater when he first saw it. I was never told that until years later, which now, given what happened with Harvey, I'm kind of glad that the Julie's Gum guy got him so upset he went running out.
It's a weird, ironic twist, but sometimes things happen as they do.
It is. It was really strange, but there's no way that film will not continue to hold a super dear place in his heart, because it really was his beginning. And he's managed to create a universe around it that wasn't as common back then. I mean, now you've got you got the huge universes, MCU, and all those franchise movies, and but Kevin Smith universe is really pretty astounding what he's managed to do since Clerks was released.
Now, if you can say this, great. If you can't, that's okay. What do you see Clerks 3 being?
Well, if he sticks with what he's talked about online, I mean, it's out there. If you check him out on YouTube or any of his social media, he's posted and he's talked about what the premise is. It includes the heart attack, but he's already talked about it, so it's not like I'm giving anything away. Because sometimes you'd like the fans to kind of not know so much, but at the same time, it doesn't seem to matter. He let a lot of Reboot go before Reboot came out, and people still, went to see it because he was touring with it. But the premise is Randall has the heart attack that Kevin had in real life. Survives. Says, you know what? We always talk about making movies. We love movies. We should make a movie. They are going to make Clerks. So it's so meta and weird that now Randall and Dante are going to actually shoot Clerks. So it's so insane. Like, a lot of us could really, I don't know how he has it. I don't know those details. I don't know if there's a scene where you see people auditioning, or if there's a scene where I'm not sure how he's going to do it, but it's mind-blowing to me when you think about that, right? Dante and Randall are now Randall's going to put his money where his mouth is. He's always talking about movies, always criticizing other movies, really wanted to make a film, never did, had the heart attack, realized, you got to make the best of every day, and they shoot Clerks. So it's wild and crazy. And I know after seeing Reboot, by being able to judge the barometer of the supporters and the people who really dig Kevin, I think it's a really great idea, and it's probably going to really be a sweetheart of a film. But I don't have a copy of a script. I just retelling what I've heard him say a few times.
Nice. So we're sitting here right now with Mr. Scott Churchson from Clerks.
Sorry,
projects. What's again?
My audio went out. I missed you for a moment.
Okay. No, I'm just doing a recap for anybody tuning in. We're alongside Mr. Scott Churchson, a.k.a. the Chuli's Gum rep from Clerks. Also, you can find him in Vulgar, Shooting Clerks, which is the documentary where he actually played Kevin Smith's father, and a myriad of other things as well. Find us always on Film Set Tales on Twitter and Tales from the Film Set on Facebook. I did want to talk to you a little bit about shooting Clerks. I wanted to get into that, but before I do, any of you guys have any questions or anything you want to go at? Or
I have to ask, because we've all been born and raised in New Jersey. None of us seem to be able to get out of here, mostly by choice. There's not really any place else I'd rather be. So I was just wondering how you made the transition between music and acting, and how you started, whether that was in high school or before, where you grew up, and why are you still here?
Good question, because there was definitely different chunks of my life where going out west was on the docket. Just never panned out. I was, from a very young age, from as early as I can remember, a huge music fan. I was raised by a very strong single mother, and today's, we're celebrating women today. So my mother was back at the, I've got some years on everybody. Single parent family. It's 1963. It was tough. Women were really judged and looked down on if you had a child out of wedlock in a disparaging sort of way. Her own family kind of took a while to warm up to her and I, because they didn't like who my dad was, who I now have a wonderful relationship with my father, but it wasn't that way for most of my younger life. But anyway, born a single mother, super, super supportive of everything I was into. I was loved music from the time I could remember. I had an older cousin who was like a father figure who would sit me down and I like at 5 years old and like play the Beatles and the Stones and Otis Redding and Sly and the Family Stone. Like when these albums were new, you know, like late 60s, early 70s. So I just fell in love with music. And by the time I was 10, I pestered my mother first for drums, but that wasn't going to happen because we lived in a
No
little
one ever gets drums. Everybody
Right.
asks for drums. Nobody gets drums, and we all end up with a guitar or a piano. That's
Right.
all. It's always how it goes.
Clarinet.
Especially if you're going, you know, if you live in a small apartment and,
Yeah.
you know, money was tight. My mother really had a struggle, and God bless her. She did a wonderful, amazing job. But I got the guitar, fell in love with it at around age 10, literally from the time I was 13 to probably my mid 20s somewhere. Most of my waking hours, I had a guitar in my hand. I was obsessed and loved it. Was in a ton of different bands. I caught the acting bug in high school, and then into college. I went to Bergen Community College for my associates. I wanted to get an associates in the arts where I could keep studying music and theater, and I got the acting bug there. But I love and respect theater, but film was always the thing I really loved. Acting for the camera, that medium was what really drove me, and character actors and guys that, you know, occasionally they get to lead, but they're usually, you know, a supporting player. I gravitated to that from an early age. And in my 20s, I was doing the band thing pretty hard right up until my late 20s. And we came very close to getting a record deal, the band I was in. But like those things go, it didn't work out. And I had a very severe alcohol and drug problem by the time I was in my late 20s. And I battled about 15, almost 20 years. I'm sober now 15 years this July 4th. But it took a long time of really, the 80s and 90s are quite a blur. But I had basically drank my way out of the band. And I thought to myself, this is the reasoning I had, which is crazy. It's crazy reasoning. I said, you know, I'm not going to go and get into another band because I don't want to drag down another 4 or 5 other people with my bad habit. But with the acting gigs and as a character actor, if you can nail the audition, 3 or 4 days on a set, 5 days on a set, I could behave long enough not to blow that. Let me go back to the acting and give it a shot. And I would sober up for periods of time. I just would fall off the wagon horrifically afterwards. But that was the reasoning. And not shortly after I came up with this plan, I read for Clerks and I got that gig. And then after it was released, I got a couple of really cool indie film gigs with some people who were fairly prominent at the time. Michael Dilorenzo, who's been in movies forever. He's a dancer, singer, actor. He's most known from the 90s. He was on New York Undercover as Detective Torres. And back then, there was only a handful of networks. And if you had a series TV, you were a big star at that point. And he was a sweetheart of a guy, though. And all of my scenes were with him. So I was on an upswing. And then we did Vulgar. And that was released to a lot of craziness because of the nature of the film. But the question was, how'd you stay here, not going out west? The work that I was starting to, a lot of work I would get from word of mouth from people that knew the Clerks movies or knew the View Askew universe, knew me musically because from word of mouth, people found out that I was a musician. I began to get scoring gigs. If a lot of indie films I worked on, I did the score for. And a lot of films I did the score for, I wasn't necessarily in the cast, but there were a lot that it worked out that way. I got hired, I got the acting gig, and I also got the scoring gig for about 10 years from like 99 to about 2008. Probably about, say, 7 or 8 titles, low budget, but things I'm very proud of and happy with that are out on Amazon, that did very well in festivals. So I was kind of like becoming in the indie world, I was a bigger fish going out west, getting the SAG card, and now being up against huge fish. I'd be a tiny fish in a huge pond. I stayed non-union and was a bigger fish in the non-union indie world. And I got, good, fair, independent contracts. So I'm SAG eligible, have been for years, but I've stayed out of the union because I was doing better out of the union.
We have this conversation very often. Every time I'm on set, I'm talking to somebody about their non-union and they're just milking they're trying not to get caught. They got 11 waivers or something, and they really just want to do non-union work, but they want to stay in New York, but they don't know if they should join. I mean, it's like the saga continues. That never seems to resolve itself. And now it's so expensive to join. It's almost like like you're saying, if your contracts are good, it's not, it's not the end all be all for everyone, especially since you probably won't get benefits now. And that, I know Scott's dealing with that. You're probably not getting your pension. So why would you join at this point? And people are still going back and forth about it. So I'm sure a lot of people actually relate to that. Could you tell us a little bit about what goes into scoring, even just an indie film? Like, what are your responsibilities, and how do you like to do it? Are you a piano guy? Do you do everything on guitar? Like, what's your process?
It is varied. Guitar is my first instrument, but keyboards are a close second. I also play bass. I play harmonica. But to simply answer, a majority of it has been keyboard driven, whether it's piano or orchestra, because now you can just.
Oh yeah, you can do the whole thing yourself.
There's it's a whole orchestra right here. So I'll literally sit. This is my man cave studio with all my instruments. I'll get a rough cut of a film. It'll be playing in real time, and when there's I write down where music cues need to be or where I believe they should be. I go over that with the director to make sure he agrees. If he doesn't agree, I'll write a cue and see if he's sold on that cue. But then I will go and my favorite way to do it is to be able to cut it to frame. As the scene is unfolding, I'm getting the basis down, then I'm adding orchestra to it or taking something out. Or sometimes I have a main theme that I work around and pull out and drop in different places. Not all of the films go that way. Some of them, depending on the budget, we do what's more of I have a library of music over the 30 plus years I've been recording. And I literally have hours and hours of instrumental music that I will play something for the director. And if it catches his ear, we could drop that in as a temporary thing. A lot of that stays permanent, which is fine because that's all part of my library. It wasn't custom made for that particular film at the time, but it works well. It's almost sort of like having a library that they can choose from. But that's been really incredibly rewarding because there's nothing like when you see a scene without the music and then you see it with the music. It's so night and day.
Yeah, I don't think most people aren't privy to a rough cut, or even most people won't even watch a movie on mute to even just watch a scene that is scored beautifully. Turn the sound off and it immediately there's no life to the picture, and and it's one of those things where you don't realize how good it is until it's gone. And even like bad scoring, you don't realize how good, there's all kinds of levels of musicianship going on in the world of scoring, but even the bad stuff is still better than silence. And I don't think people realize that because we're not privy to a rough cut or a silent cut of anything. Even just to hear dialogue with no other audio mix behind it is bizarre.
Right.
No sound effects, no ambient noise, or no scoring. It seems very odd, even though we all live our lives. We live our lives with no, I don't have underscoring, playing while I'm talking, but it seems weird on screen to have nothing. And I feel like it's an underappreciated gig. for sure. And I always try to push my students to if they're any good at composition, I try to push them into film scoring, or even if you're doing it for library purposes, you know, maybe they make more like, you know, categorical music that they can use in that way. But it's like a dying art that nobody thinks of it as a career, but it's needed. And like the older guys are going to be gone soon, you know, like we need to bring some people up, for some younger kids up. So I appreciate you for sure.
Well, thank you. No, it's mind blowing. I will see, and this goes for editing in general too, because I'm pretty good with non-linear editing and computers overall. I'm a pretty big geek. So I actually got some editing gigs where I was very strange, being in the cast, having done the score, and doing all the editing, which is really strange. And you would think I would end up like there would be much more of me than anybody else, and the complete opposite happened. I literally pulled out. Yeah, I just cherry picked. You know, I mean, it's funny. You learn so much about editing because somebody could be giving their heart and soul on camera. You cut to a take of somebody just reacting, don't say a word, and then back to the other character, and it's got such an amazing resonance that I've also seen scenes where we cut it and the director's very unhappy without music, very unhappy. Oh, they're not really hitting the spots. It's weak. It wasn't their best takes. You pop a score in, and all of a sudden it's Academy Award winning acting. Literally, like somehow the acting really changed in some way.
Well, I don't think people realize there are so many audio cues coming from the score about you could have the flattest, worst dialogue you've heard in your entire life, but the way that it's scored will ultimately decide the way that the scene goes. And you have so much power in,
that's right,
you know, in the bottom. I mean, you know, it's like, oh, I almost don't want to say it because people don't realize, the performances were nice, the editing was good, but it's all about the score. And like you said, you know, man, that was terrible. Oh, wow, this is great. And you're like, yeah, that's from the...
I remember watching a thing on horror movies, and it's a very big thing in horror movies, and they say, like, mute a horror movie, and it could be, like, the big scare scene coming up, and you're like, okay, what was that? Because there was no score to it, but then, like, put the sound back on, and with the score, it gets, like, it puts you in that state of mind, and you're like, oh, my God, like, this is so scary, and it makes the scene so much better, and it is, like, you guys said, it's such an underappreciated part of the process, man. It's like there's so many times where, like Jasmine just said, like if you wrote the dialogue down on paper and just read it, you're like, it just didn't seem that great. Like, you know, this seems so much better when it was on screen. You're like, oh, it's the score, it's the mood that it's the, you know, the score set, and it's the place it put you mentally. You're like, oh, and emotionally, you're like, oh, this is amazing.
I think it's Halloween that was originally cut with little or no music. John Carpenter's Halloween, right?
Yes, I think that might have been one of the ones that I remember watching it, and I think that was one of the movies.
Because I think there was cuts of it available, and when he went in and did his score because he's a musician, and it was night and day, night and day. Like the movie was not at all connecting with any of the distributors, and they were not happy with it. And he put the score in, and it's literally one of the most powerful and popular horror movies of all time. The Exorcist, even. You know, I mean, the music in that is Tubular Bells and whatnot. And I was
going to say, everybody rips that off now as, you know, their go-to creepy music. But
right.
That was big.
Well, you know, cues are so powerful. I mean, you just know, like all you gotta do is somebody says something, you know, really
right. One open interval, and you got suspense up the wazoo.
Right, and all of a sudden, like, whoa, that's weird and creepy, you know.
So I have a bunch of friends who are they teach theater in public school, but like now that's kind of tough because you're not even allowed to be really doing theater. So a lot of their projects have like turned from we're going to do acting together on stage to a ton of video projects. And one of their projects is you get a 30-second clip of like SpongeBob or something, and they need to take out strip the audio, and they need to pick music based on, they need to turn it into a different genre. And they're starting to figure out that, oh, SpongeBob's pretty silly to watch, but mostly from the sound effects. Like, you can get some creepy Jaws sounding music and put that on SpongeBob, and man, do you have a different piece of art. So I don't teach that class, but the kids love it because they never even considered that you can separate the audio from the video. Like, to them, it's one, it's just a product that came onto the screen. But to be able to dissect it and assign it a different identity is huge. So apparently they're really into that. Now maybe we'll get a new generation of sound editors off of that product. But I know that's what, it was something to explore, and I'm glad they did it, because otherwise they would be doing improv games or something on stage, and they can't do that right now. So
yeah, one of the things I love about film is how collaborative it is and how there's so many different things going on. The layperson would not, when editing is really solid and the music is solid and the acting is solid, they're not seeing cuts and hearing mute. It's all going in there, it's seamless. You know what I mean? Like, you don't really notice good editing. It just is, type of thing. When you get in the business, or if you do it as part of your trip or your living, you could see editing and you watch editing. You say, oh, they went to the 2 shot. Oh, now they're back on the 1 shot. There's the establishing shot or whatever. But that's what I love about film. It's just an amazingly powerful medium. I get very excited about film. Theater's amazing, and theater really requires, they say theater is the actor's medium. And to me, that's like a sporting event. Like, at the age I am now, with I can't imagine going on stage for an hour and a half and having to be, nailing everything, and that's it. There's no do-overs. I respect that immensely, but I just love film.
Yeah, I started as a stand-up comic, and that's what I used to say. It's like doing theater, and I was like, "There's no do-overs, man." I'm like, "You got to get out there." And I was like, with comedy, like, you can mess up and like make it work. But I'm like, when I started, the guys I would work with, they're like we would prep, we'd rehearse in basements, and I was like, man, I got 1 shot at doing this. Like, I can't screw this up. Like, and it is like then we start going on to TV sets and film sets, and you're like, oh, I got 5 takes. I can not, I can, can't, throw a couple away here and mix it up a little bit. There's not as much pressure on.
Yeah.
Very true.
Sometimes they get cue cards on that. You get a script supervisor sitting there feeding the lines to you, and yet
I just had,
man. The people who are just asking for every single line, I'm like, why don't you just write it down on a prop and just carry it? Like, this is taking way too long.
There's a certain A-list actor, I'm not going to mention the name, but you absolutely know who it is, who cannot survive without teleprompters. And even then will fail 80% of the time. But when they land it, by God, it's a thing of beauty. Getting to that point, and however many takes are involved, but it's funny because some people have to rely on that. Yet other times you have certain people that have maybe the theater background that, can take 6, 7, even 8 pages and just plow and make it perfect every single time. Just do a couple different inflections here and there. But you have those people that they just get it.
Scott, were you with us the day with Bryan Cranston on set for Sneaky Pete with the 8-page speech?
No, I know Bryan. No, well, Bryan was producer, but did he star in that at all?
That was the first season. He was the lead villain, but I know Mike was with us, Mike Houston.
Okay.
And Bryan has this 8-page speech, and I'm like, oh God, this is going to be one of those days where we're going to be here for 19 hours. This man destroyed this speech 4 times in a row without messing up. And it was literally like watching someone do theater in front of a camera. We're I was actually in for Michael Dreyer, who played Gio's brother. And they're like, what did Mike do? I go, nothing. And Michael goes, Yeah, man. He goes, I was like, my feet were glued to the floor and I just became a spectator for about 8 minutes. He goes, because that was amazing. But I was just up in Nyack on Friday night and I had another like flashback to when season 2, we had a day player come in and he could not remember his lines. Like Scripty was feeding him lines. And there was a point where myself and the other stand-in were standing there and we were off camera, like on the side. And it was so frustrating. I started repeating the lines. Like aloud. I'm like, it's this and that. And our AD looks at me and goes, if it wasn't an ethnic role, you would be out there right now. That's the point where it took like 3 hours to shoot this scene that was maybe like a half a page. And after we shot it, the guy comes up to Gio and Desmond Harrington and he's like, hey, can I get a picture? And you want to see like Desmond's having a meltdown walking to the next set. He's like, what are you doing? Oh my God. And I'm like, we're like, it's okay. He's like, the one thing, you just know your lines. And like, he was free. We're like, let him go. Like we thank God we had like a 4-block walk to the next set. We're like, just let him go. Like, let him get it out now. We get to the next set. He's like, I'm good. I got it out of my system.
He's good. So yeah, I saw, we got about 4 minutes left at this point. So we won't get to 5 questions. That's fine. We can always say that for another time. But Scott, how can people find out more about you? How can they get in touch with you? Anything like that?
On all social media, it's just my name. I've got scottschiaffo.com is basically a landing page that will get you to IMDb, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I have a cart page on there because I have merch, personalized merch, where the money goes to Angels of Animals. It's an animal charity here in Northern New Jersey. Majority of the money goes to the Angels of Animals if you buy it from my website cart, but pretty much everything's available on Amazon for the most part. But you can find me on any of the social media, Scott Churchson. Please come on out and join up. My social media is fun. I'm very present. I have what I call a grassroots career, which enables me to be able to do a lot of that, as opposed to some people who are, as you get higher and higher up that chain, they can't possibly be, although there's some now that really do, which is wonderful it's a new world now. Social media has changed everything. And I'm a big geek. I'm a nerd. I enjoy it. I know there's a lot of bad with it too, but we won't get into that. But they can find me anywhere you search Scott Churchson on Google, more than you're ever going to want to know is going to come up.
Awesome. Well, at least it's easier to find you that way. And there's only the one on IMDb that makes it easier.
Oh, right.
So awesome. So thank you as always. Like I said, we got 2 minutes left, so we're gonna have to call it here. Any final thoughts from all three of you at this point?
I feel like we need to start a band. I mean, I'm just saying, if you need a permanent bass player, I'm available.
Well, my wife's considering taking up drumming, so.
Right? See, I'm telling you, we need post-quarantine band because it's getting a little dry over here.
All right, I got the wood block down. Rob, what are you going to do?
I can play the triangle or the
okay, you got the triangle. I got the wood block.
So we can play like orchestral music with you guys in the percussion section. Great.
Awesome. I can also do great air vocals. Air guitar I suck at, but air vocals are good. So cool, we can do that. So awesome. Scott, thank you, man. It's good catching up with you. I appreciate it.
Thank you guys. I really had fun.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll do this again if you're cool with it.
I wanted to get those 5 questions, man.
Yeah, I know. I put some time into that today. I'm kind of disappointed a little bit.
Part two.
Okay, yes. Very good.
But this show can be heard on, like I said, 35 different platforms across 4 different continents. We will get Antarctica one day, Rob. You and I've talked about that. Find us always on, like I said, Facebook at Tales from the Film Set or Film Set Tales on Twitter. My name is Scott Churchson. Thanks for tuning in. Alongside me is the charismatic Jasmine Bloch-Krempels, Mr. Robert Stats, and our special guest, Mr. Truly's Gum Rep, and a myriad of things, a laundry list on his resume of both acting and choreography and everything else. I'm sorry, composer.
Composer, yes.
There, I'll get it right. I've been awake since 5 a.m.
I can't dance a lick, so.
So basically music composer, actor, professional everything, basically a savant of all. Mr. Scott Churchson. I'm Scott Churchson. This has been Tales from the Film Set. Have a great night.
Have a good night, guys.